So Simon, what is the one thing that truly maximizes the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
Data. Just letting that dynamic silence just sit there. Yeah, I'm big on my data, and I think in terms of knowing your figures inside out as an estate agent is going to impact that seller getting the very best price.
Okay. So when we're talking knowing, so let's say, for example, knowing Joe Blogg's estate agent, sales manager working for Joe Blogs, are you saying
Yeah,
he needs to know his figures?
his figures and the industry as a whole. So, for example, when we're recording this, Zoopla released recently that approximately the average UK estate agent is achieving 90% of the asking price. Well, if I'm achieving 100% of the asking price, and let's say UK average value is around 300, all of a sudden there's a £15,000 difference between me and the average agent. So, John, who do you want in your corner fighting your battle? The one who's going to get you 15 grand more, or the one who's going to lose you 15 grand of equity?
Mm. Did you say it was 90% valuation accuracy rate on average?
So Zoopla have said 95%.
95%, right? Yeah.
It's like it might be 0.1 or 0.2, but give or take, it's about 95%.
But why is data so important though? Right, fine. So we get it. We're generating more money, yeah.
Yeah.
But how else is it more, or how is that the thing that's going to truly maximize value?
Well, I think on that as well, we all know that 95% of our buying decisions are made with emotion. That's obviously a big part of it. But I think we don't understand enough that that last 5% of logic is a really, really important part. And where that logic comes in is from data. So, emotionally, I liked John who came out to my house. He was really nice and I trust him, da da da. And then it's the logic, the last 5% that decide, who they're going to go with. So what I mean by that, for example, if I'm saying to you as a seller, John, I'm on average going to get you 15 grand more than another estate agent. That's important to sellers, and they appreciate, okay, well, I'll go with that estate agent, Simon, because he'll get me 15 grand more. He does charge 2, 3, 5 grand more, but I'm going to be better off. So they need educating on the data and the figures so that they make an informed decision. Because the public typically think when they move once every decade and a half, roughly it is at the moment, they're just thinking fee to start with. Like, right, who's going to give me the highest valuation and the cheapest fee? So you need to take that to one side and show them it's not just about the fee, it's getting the best price in your back pocket at the end of it. That's why I think data is so important for them to make an informed decision.
And also, are you saying that that the maximum amounts of money comes from an agent that can actually get a property to complete as well, and that's where that data
Yeah,
comes in?
100%. So another point you've made there, obviously, it's not just about the money. You obviously need to get the property sold. Now, if you looked across the several 100,000 properties which are currently for sale on Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market, etc., 60% of them are showing as unsold. So at the moment, you've got less than a flip of a coin chance of actually completing on your house sale. Can you imagine if I come into your home now and go, John, have you got any idea the probability of you moving home out of 100, like percentage wise? What do you think? I imagine most people go, I don't know, 80, 90%. No, actually, you've got a 40% chance of moving. But with me, you'd have an 80% chance. Therefore, I'm 100% more likely, if my maths is right, to sell your property compared to the average agent. Would you not want to invest in someone who charges a higher fee or a higher investment, because they're more likely to sell your property and get you a better price?
And also,
You're helping them make the right decisions.
Yeah, and you're almost, as the agent, also working out whether that seller worth it as well, because the seller wants the big money, but they want to pay a small fee.
Yeah, well, if you think at the end of the day, at the moment, again, average agent wise, 60% is not selling. So 60% of properties you bring to market are costing you money, not making money.
Yeah,
You've got the properties you bring to market. You've got to have at least 50%. You're very conservative, but at least half of them have got to make you money rather than cost you money.
Yeah, but agents just go, listen, let's market the property up here because I've got buyers at this. We marketed all these other properties up here. The seller is looking at Rightmove, they're looking at Zoopla, they can see all the other prices that are up here. The agent's going, and by the way, my fee is down here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the seller goes, oh man, that's bloody great. That's amazing. That's fantastic. All right, lovely. So you think you can get me way up here, and you're saying your fee's way down here. And the agent goes, yeah, but of course we're obviously gonna have to work really hard. And because of that, I'm gonna have to put you on like a 22-week contract.
And I think that's where an agent can combat that by saying that I don't do a contract. There's no time frame on it. You know, you can find me at any point. So I'm confident in selling your house, John. But also, I'm getting, let's say, 100% of asking price. The other two agents you've interviewed, what percentage of asking price do they get? And the seller will go, I don't know. Did they not talk to you about that, John? Because that's a really fundamental thing about selling your property, is how much money are they going to gain you or potentially lose you? And it's the whole negotiation piece. Where we have Perry Power on the podcast and Perry talking about measures that matter and going, you know, on average, I negotiate. One of my clients negotiates an average with sellers an extra, I think it's 22.5 grand in their back pocket from start to end offer. John, who do you want in your corner? An agent that hasn't told you what they're achieving, or me, who's demonstrated, but on average, I get 22.5 grand more per transaction for my sellers.
Yeah, totally. No, and do you know what? And that's beautiful because it actually takes away the emotional element. And it makes the sellers, in my opinion, actually start to think critically about, oh, yeah, actually, how am I going to do this? And we'll start to bring back the reasons why they were looking to sell in the first place. Yeah, I mean, there's I remember once I did a valuation and I basically said to the seller I could get him another £80,000 more than three other agents. And of course, the seller, fair play to him, he was a developer. He was like, mate, I am not going to give you my property because you've clearly overvalued in order to win an instruction. And talking about stats to sort of like, you know, go, yeah, fine, I completely agree with where you're at. I was that agent who used to get beaten up and spat out by agents that would overvalue and then basically have a lower fee or massively overvalue and have a much higher fee on the basis of this big, massive amount that they reckon they could get. And of course, little John Savage, telling the truth, was always getting beaten up and spat out. Now, that was the catalyst for me, where I actually said to that fella, no, I've got the perfect buyer for your home, but all I'm asking for is one viewing, for you to send me an email to say that you'll pay my fee. And I don't want you to market this home, your home. Don't want you to market. I don't want you to expose it to market. And I'm not going to ask you to sign a contract. And I did sell it for £80,000 more than the others. And he was like, oh my God, you're bloody incredible. You know, when we completed, how the fuck did you do that?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, because I just happened to know at that time the perfect buyer that was going to pay you the perfect money because everybody won. But trust me on this, 99% of the time, that doesn't happen. What's just happened does not happen. And again, I could only do that if I knew not just my stats, but who my buyers were as well.
And I think what you've said there, and I heard you say that exact story of Matt Giggs as well. And I knew when you were telling it, I was like, I've heard you say that on the podcast. And when you're saying it, I was like, I've got a couple of notes to write down what you're saying. Knowing your buyers inside out, you know, it's a fine art. And I think that we've lost that a bit in the estate agency in recent years because the market's been so buoyant. Managing your buyers has not been as prevalent as it was. You know, I remember very early days of my sales career, I joined as, you know, naive, wet money as 16-year-old in 2007. You know, Monday mornings, right, who's your best buyers? You didn't have a CRM next to you. Literally, you had a book, and I know what was coming in that meeting. The manager's going to say, here's your 5 buyers. And it's like, this. Okay, what are they buying? And all of a sudden they go, right, I'm going up to value this week. Bring them up and just tell them about that, for example. So, yeah, I think that's very powerful on the buyer side of things, and just the use of data as well, which maybe from something else. Having a conversation with an agent I worked with yesterday, and they've just listed a property or taken instructions for the new year, and it was from an on behalf of buyer campaign. Now, most estate agents will put out leaflets and marketing that will say free, no obligation valuation. Right? They all do the same thing, don't get great results. Whereas they sent out genuine letters saying, we've got a couple called Simon and Louise. They're looking for XYZ. Can you help them? Now the property that's coming to market rang them up on the market with someone else and said, love your letter. Not sure if the estate agent we're on with is showing these buyers around. Can we have a conversation? Of course we can. So they've won a listing off of knowing that buyers, what they're looking for and sending letters on their behalf. So again, going back to the first answer I gave of data, it's obviously relationships, but behind that relationships is knowing the data of your buyers. Who are they? What's their positions? What they're looking for? And I just want to, I'm going off on one now, John, so apologies. But just to go back on a couple of points you made on the £80,000 above what other agents have said. Used to measure pounds per square foot on every single transaction. I think I've heard you speak about pounds per square foot before. Obviously, it's not the be all and end all, but it's a good measure. I remember one of my last appraisals that I did, and someone wanted a ridiculous price. And I just showed them my spreadsheet and said, if you get that price, you achieve £500 per square foot, which is a lot of money in my area. And I was like, only one in the last 100 sales I've done has got £500 per square foot. I was like, so it's a 1% chance. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's a very small chance. And then just the last point was in my head, and then I'll shut up, John. But you mentioned earlier about the whole reduced strategy. So I'll send this over to you, and you can perhaps put it in the show notes. And if anyone wants to hear about it, I can send it over if they've not seen it. But Tim Bannister at Rightmove has done some absolutely golden research on how reduced properties perform. So he looked at the start of 2017 to the end of 2022, properties that reduce their asking price. And there's 4 key metrics. Properties that reduce their asking price versus those that don't are 10% less likely to sell. If they do sell, they take twice as long. If they do sell, I think it's twice as likely to fall through. And those that are reduced and haven't sold are 1.5 to 2 times more likely to change estate agent. So when you just said about what about the agent who, says to put it on at a really high price, if I'm sat in your living room and I say, John, it's about 500 according to the evidence in front of us, and you go another agent said 525, you go, well, there's no evidence supporting that. And if you go on at 525 because you're not in a rush and you want to take the market and then look to reduce in a month, you will reduce your chances of selling by 10%. To which you'll go, what are you on about? And I'll go, well, here's literally research for 6 years from Rightmove on billions of pieces of data that shows you will reduce your chances of selling. Do you want to reduce your chances of selling by 10%? No, I don't. Well, let's price it correctly from the outset.
Yeah.
So again, just ways of using data and turning that sort of those stats into stories.
Well, yeah, do you know what? And I love it, mate. I absolutely love it, because for me, again, trying to find that $1 million sentence or that nugget from someone that goes, wow, that was bloody excellent. And this is what's so nice about like hearing you say that, because the sellers that are going to be listening to this and the agents who want to be more than just estate agents, actually like proper elite, will also be listening to this, will be thinking, actually, do you know what? I was thinking about my stats because my stats ain't that bad. And I didn't know whether to use it when I'm in having conversations, but it's so powerful because that 5% of logic that you're talking about, that is the bit that keeps the deal together. So when the banker mum and dad are going, little Johnny, little Sally, or Simon and Louise in your example, are you bloody sure? Because we're about to give you a load of money here. At least Simon and Louise can go, well, actually, Dad, I don't know if you've seen this from such and such or whatever, if they're buying. Equally for selling, no, we're bloody selling. This is what's going to happen. This is what Rightmove have said. This is the research that they've done. Suddenly it brings back the element that everyone needs, which is actually to keep people's feet on the ground. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For both buyers and sellers. One of my old colleagues I recorded with, I don't know if you've ever listened to the podcast I recorded with, a guy called John Athanasu. And I used to work with each other, right? He was one of the best agents I've ever worked with. Like literally, right, will make anyone look mediocre, right? Now, how he used to do that a deal could be falling out of bed, a bomb could have gone off inside the house, right? Divorce cases during the actual sale and purchase, right? Everything you could possibly imagine would go wrong, he'd still get it to complete. And it was just the way in which he was, this way he's just basically used to speak to people, the way he used to just ask questions, so on and so forth, right? But one of the things he recently did was that he called 3 agents out to value his flat. But before actually inviting them to the property, he said to agent A, right, listen, I've spoken to agent B and I've spoken to agent C. Can you tell me why you're the one that should actually be selling my home? Thing is, he hadn't actually spoken to agent B or C then. but then did called agent B and said, right, I've spoken to agent A and I've spoken to agent C, right? They don't think you're that great. Can I ask the reasons why you should be selling my flat before you invite you to a valuation? And I was like, what was the response? And he said, they all flapped. Let me go and call somebody for you. Let me call you back, whatever. And none of the three that he called had an answer. Now he put me on the spot and said, so what would you say, John? And I was like, well, firstly, my valuation accuracy rate is 99.47%. My days on market are 29.5 days versus my competitors at that time, which was 163 days. I've got a valuation to instruction rate at almost 1 in 1, and which is brilliant, right, for me selfishly. But for my sellers, I've got an almost 1 in 1 value instruction to completion rate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so, and that's the thing, you see, when you're using, like for your example, using data, oh, I love it, mate, because I'm like, wow, actually, no one said that.
So on a couple of things you said there, and I know that you're a fan of Tom Panos, because I heard you say some of his quotes on the pod before. And when you were saying what you're saying, it made me think of the Tom Panos quote: "I don't sell the most homes; I sell homes for the most."
Yeah, yeah.
Because you could, like, well, you know, there could be, so where I was an agent, there was another agent in the town and sold a lot more houses than us. And I used to get that in the living room. They'd go, Simon, the other agent who came out, they said they're cheaper than you and they sell loads more houses than you. And I'd go, yeah, that's true. And they go, you're agreeing with them. I was like, they are cheaper and they sell more houses than me. But would it be crazy if I demonstrated to you what I do differently to get you the best price and give you the best chance of selling? Bit of Chris Voss language there, never split difference. I know, but again, you've quoted on the podcast. And they'd be like, yeah, okay. I go, okay, so they've sold a lot more houses than me. But if you just look at that, and sorry, Chris Watkins for saying this, but a right pie chart, not for marketing, but in the living room, and say, look at how many they've listed and look at how many they've sold. The same for me as well. So listed, sold. I've listed a lot less. Yeah, I think that the conversion rate is very crucial on it, and you said that on a few different bits of the data. The other two things you made me think of is, in my last year in agency, 38% of what I sold failed to sell to another estate agent. So again, if I'm in your living room, you go, the other agent's cheaper. I hear that, John. 38% of what I sell is failed to sell to another agent. Do you want to be one of those statistics, or do you want to get it right first time round? You'd hate for it to take a lot longer, you get a worse price. And on the thing of you said about your friend and ex-colleague, again, it made me think of a very simple question that an estate agent must get asked on a daily basis, from someone in a shop to friends to family, to buyers to sellers, which is, how's the market, John? I ask estate agents all the time, how's your market? And it's like, yeah, you know, it's all right, it's this, it's that. No, that's not the answer. How's your market? And it's like, tell them what's going on. Like, well, you know, we've seen a bit of a rise in buyer demand because of X, Y, Z, or, you know, it's pretty good for sellers at the moment because there's less price reduction happening, whatever. Have a specific answer to that. Know your figures of what's going on, rather than, yeah, it's all right. Like, you've got to know your data to give confidence, because I think at the moment, obviously 2023 has been a challenging year for estate agents, because, you know, the media love negativity, you know, it helps them sell advertising space. So no wonder buyers and sellers are going, well, I'm not sure about interest rates and house prices. Everyone keeps saying that prices are going to crash. They're going, well, I'm just not going to buy now. So it dents buyer confidence. You've got to increase buyer and seller confidence. How can you do that? Share with them factual evidence and data of what's going on in the market, not just a right move house price index, which just says this is what the average asking price in the country is. That means nothing. What's the average sales price? How many transactions are happening? That's what's going to increase confidence.
Oh yeah, totally. And so, but equally, in my opinion, it also, let's say, for example, the market isn't particularly doing that well. And so whilst it's not, you can still put a positive spin on things that are not going so well. Do you know what I mean? So it's a case of, well, if it's £524 per square foot on average in this location, But at the moment, on that particular road, it's 664 quid. The reason for that is this, and this, and this, and this, and this, whatever those reasons are. Would it be £664 in the next year or so? I don't know. I'm a very small cog in a massive, massive wheel. But what I am saying to you right now is there's still the appetite for that particular road. I've been on viewings, by the way, where I remember one viewing, and this guy was like completely gobsmacked, but wasn't impressed. Was not impressed. I had a viewing that was arranged for me. I've then quickly qualified the buyer at the viewing, and I was like, mate, this is not for you. What you want is not this. And he said to his developer friend, who is this guy? Who is this guy? What's he talking about? And I was like, all right, fine, do what you want. If you want to buy this, be my guest. But everything you've just said to me, because they were from out of town, they were from Ireland, they didn't know the area. I was like, you're about to make a monumental mistake. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? I'm doing that because guess what? They were realized when the logic kicks in that they had made a mistake and they're going to pull out the sale. And I, as the agent, am going to lose a person. They ended up buying about 4 or 5 houses through us.
Yeah, you just made me think of something on the whole logic that I said about we all talk about the 95% emotion. It's just made me think of kind of reframing of a phrase. But it's like emotion might get them through the door, logic keeps them in the door.
Yeah.
I think I've just stolen another phrase from marketing, but I think the emotion gets them in that door, and then the logic, because it's a bit like I was having this chat with a friend of mine who's a first-time buyer at the moment, and I can't remember but let's say a house was on at 475, roughly off the top of my head, and let's say a deal could be done at 465, and he's at 460. And he's like, I don't want them to win. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, I don't want to pay 465 because then the estate agent's got the price that he's wanting to get through seller. He's like, I want to win. It's like, it's not about winning. Like, don't lose that house for £5,000. He said, yeah, but £5,000 is a lot of money, Simon. It's like, okay, put it on the table in front of you in readies. Yeah, that's a lot of money. I said, let's break it down over your 25, 30, 35-year mortgage. What are you going for? And he said, it's literally, a pound a day. I was like, are you going to lose the house that you want, which you're going to be in for a decade, you've told me, for a pound a day? It's like, yeah, when you put it like that. And something he was nervous of as well, he said, well, all the media stuff, all the predictions of the prices in 2024 are going to go down. I was like, what a fantastic market for you to buy in then. Less competition from others. You're going to get it at a realistic price rather than, people competing in a stamp duty holiday of record low interest rates where it actually goes ridiculously high. And I said to him, so his name's Marcus. I said, Marcus, in the last 70 years, according to the Nationwide House Price Index, 90% of the time, prices have stayed the same or gone up. So you're buying in the once a decade where the prices go down. So that's a great time to buy. Get in before competition comes and the prices go back up, because you'll be here for 10 years. It will go back up.
And therein lies your convincing argument around data actually maximizes the value of someone's home, because as we spoke about, it's not actually the amount of money necessarily. It's actually completing where loads of other agents are unable to actually get a property to complete, and then end up having to go to another agent and end up spending loads of money, almost paying twice. Because now, I mean, and I'm sure you've done it, where you've said to a seller, listen, if you have to come back to me, my door is always open, but that 400 grand I'm telling you right now, I can't guarantee you that 400 grand if you go with the other agent. Is that all right?
Yeah.
And then they end up going, they come back and go, Simon, I'm so sorry. And you say, do you remember the 400 grand? Well, we can try it, but there's no guarantee my end. Well, guess what? That's cost them even more money, right?
Yeah. And again, on your point there of like let's say lost market appraisals or win back appraisals, again, my last year of agency, 18%, 1/8 of my sales completions I originally lost.
Wow.
I don't know what it's like for other agents, but that 18% is the equivalent of I don't know, probably £100,000 in revenue. Now, a lot of people who have 2 or 3 agents come out, when they change estate agents, they typically don't go back to one of the agents who originally valued it because they're embarrassed. Because it's like, told you so. I used to write a thank you card. So if you had me out and we didn't agree on fee and value, I'd write a thank you card. John, thank you so much for having me into your home. Really appreciate it. Hopefully I can help you find your next home. All the best. And I'd stay in touch every other week, giving tips on what's going on. And that, again, knowing my data, and funnily enough, lost market appraisals did actually pay me a higher fee in the end. I had to say, look, John, I'm having to pick up the pieces of the mess of another agent. I'm going to have to charge you more money because it's going to take more time now. And just in terms of picking up the pieces, just going back to my friend, it just made me think of, I bought my first house in 2016 and I paid £235,000 for it. Now I could have bought that exact house 2 years prior for 185,000. And, because I just use your name, John down the pub went, well, it's not a good time to buy, is it? Either I'm an estate agent, I'm going, yeah, maybe it's not. So I paused buying. So that lady buys that house, 185, sells it to me 2 years later, 235,000. So I'm like, okay, so I'm 50 grand down at this point. Now, I exchanged contracts on the day we voted to leave the EU. And the solicitor said to me, you're going to pull out on it because the market's going to crash. I went, who knows? But I'm gonna buy it anyway. I worked out not too long ago, based on the property prices of that property and rental prices and everything else that goes into it. So if I didn't buy when I did, where we are now, probably be 250 grand worse off from not gaining equity, paying off a mortgage and property price growth, the rent that you've paid and where property prices are now. So if I hadn't bought that property, half a dozen years later, it would have cost me 250 grand.
So in essence, to achieve as a seller the maximum amount of money, based on the example you've just given and the ones before, sellers need a massive injection delivered the right way from an agent who absolutely knows their data, especially if they're coming up against agents that are bullshitting about prices, to fully maximize a seller's home first time, not leaving it languishing and remaining stagnant on the market, open to being abused, and then end up a low fee agent is end up costing that seller a hell of a lot more money than they're expected to pay in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. Look, we both know time kills price, and the longer the property's on the market, the less it's going to achieve. But I'm sure we've both had it a lot over the years where you get a really good offer early on and the seller goes, oh, John, if that's what I've got on day one, imagine where I'll be in month one. And you're like, and a lesser offer, wishing you'd taken it. So,
yeah, absolutely. Right. Simon, you've been absolutely amazing, mate. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Data. I'm so with you, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Right, mate. End of podcast.